I never thought that at 67 I would be told my appearance was inappropriate by my own family. But that's exactly what happened at my daughter-in-law's baby shower, where she publicly requested I dress more modestly. What she didn't realize was that the beautiful event she was hosting had been paid for almost entirely by me. Something I'd kept quiet about until that moment changed everything. Please like and subscribe to see how I finally stood up for myself after a lifetime of sacrifice. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a delicate lavender envelope with silver script that spelled out my name, Elaine Morrison. Inside was a card announcing Amanda's baby shower to be held at the Prescott Valley Country Club. I ran my fingers over the embossed paper, feeling that familiar mixture of joy and hesitation. My first grandchild was on the way, but my relationship with Amanda had always been strained. She had married my son Michael 5 years ago in a ceremony that seemed designed to minimize my presence. I wore beige and smiled through it all. I placed the invitation on my kitchen counter, staring at it while I sipped my morning coffee. The spring sunlight streamed through my kitchen windows, warming the clay pots of herbs I kept on the windowsill. This house had been my sanctuary for 40 years. The place where I'd raised my children after Tom died of a heart attack when Michael was just 10 and his sister Jenna was 8. I'd been a high school English teacher, stretching my salary with evening tutoring sessions and summer school to keep us afloat. My phone buzzed. Michael's name appeared on the screen. "Mom, did you get the invitation?" His voice had that careful tone he always used when Amanda might be listening. "Yes, it's lovely. I'm looking forward to it." A pause. "Mom, Amanda wanted me to call about something specific. The shower is going to be really nice, and there's a bit of a financial issue." My grip tightened on the phone. I knew what was coming. Despite Michael's job as an architect and Amanda's position at a marketing firm, they always seemed to be stretching beyond their means. "What kind of issue, Michael?" He cleared his throat. "The venue and the catering. It's a bit more than we expected. And with the baby coming, we're trying to be careful with our savings." I closed my eyes. "How much?" "About 4,000. But Mom, you don't have to. I'll take care of it," I said, cutting him off. I didn't want him to hear the resignation in my voice. "Just have them send me the invoices." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." His relief was palpable. "And don't tell Amanda I asked, okay? She's really sensitive about money stuff right now." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, calculator in hand. $4,000 was a significant portion of my retirement cushion, but this was my first grandchild. I would make it work. The invoices arrived the next day. One for the venue rental at $2,800, another for catering at $1,450. The total was actually $4,250, more than Michael had mentioned. I wrote the checks without complaint, addressing them to the country club and the catering company as instructed. In the 3 weeks before the shower, I spent hours searching for the perfect dress. I wanted something special for this milestone. I finally found it at a boutique in downtown Prescott. A silk dress in a soft teal color that complemented my silver hair and brought out the blue in my eyes. It had 3/4 sleeves, a modest boat neckline, and fell just below my knees. At $275, it was more than I would usually spend on myself, but this was a special occasion. I paired it with a simple strand of pearls Tom had given me on our 10th anniversary. The morning of the shower dawned bright and clear, that perfect Arizona spring weather before the crushing heat of summer arrived. I drove to the country club with butterflies in my stomach. My gift for the baby, carefully wrapped on the passenger seat beside me, was a handmade quilt I'd spent months creating, incorporating fabrics from both Michael's and Amanda's families. The country club looked spectacular. Pink and lavender balloons framed the entrance to the event room where round tables draped in white linen were adorned with centerpieces of fresh peonies and baby's breath. A table for gifts stood by the windows overlooking the golf course. About 30 women milled about, most of them Amanda's friends and colleagues I didn't know. I spotted Jenna across the room and made my way toward her. My daughter had flown in from Seattle for the weekend, and the sight of her familiar face was a relief. "Mom, you look beautiful," she said, embracing me. Her eyes traveled over my dress appreciatively. That color is perfect on you. Thank you, sweetheart. I wanted something special for today. I placed my gift on the designated table and accepted a mimosa from a passing server. Amanda was holding court near the window, her baby bump prominent in a form-fitting pink dress. She was laughing with a group of young women who all seemed to be wearing variations of the same stylish outfit. I took a deep breath and approached them. Amanda, congratulations. Everything looks lovely. I leaned in to kiss her cheek. She turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Elaine, you made it. Let me introduce you to my friends from work. I nodded politely as she rattled off names I immediately forgot. These women were all at least 30 years younger than me, with their smooth skin and trendy clothes. I felt the familiar pang of being an outsider, the old woman in the room. We were just talking about the nursery, one of them said. Amanda's going with a woodland theme. It's going to be so Instagram-worthy. I smiled and nodded, taking a sip of my mimosa. That sounds wonderful. When I was preparing for Michael, we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. We painted the nursery yellow. The young women exchanged glances, and I could read their thoughts clearly. This old lady and her outdated experiences. Well, that was a long time ago, Amanda said with a thin laugh. Things are different now. The event coordinator announced that brunch would be served, and we all moved to our assigned tables. I was seated at a table with some of Amanda's distant relatives, women I had met only once at the wedding. Jenna was at a different table, seated with cousins her age. The food was excellent: quiche, fresh fruit, pastries, and a selection of gourmet salads, all paid for by my checks. I made polite conversation with the women at my table, asking about their families and sharing safe stories about Michael as a child. Every so often, I would catch Amanda watching me from the head table, her expression unreadable. After the meal, it was time for gifts. Amanda sat in a decorated chair while her maid of honor, Brittany, handed her presents one by one. I watched as she unwrapped luxury baby items, a high-end stroller, designer clothes, a silver baby rattle from Tiffany's. When my gift was placed in her lap, I sat up straighter, hoping she would appreciate the time and thought I had put into it. This is from Michael's mom, Brittany announced. Amanda unwrapped the quilt, holding it up briefly. Oh, it's handmade. How traditional. Thank you, Elaine. She set it aside quickly, reaching for the next gift, an expensive baby monitor system. The quilt, with its careful stitching and meaningful fabric choices, was forgotten. I felt a hand on my shoulder and looked up to find Jenna standing beside me. It's beautiful, Mom, she whispered. Don't worry about it. The gift opening seemed to go on forever. When it finally ended, the guests dispersed for coffee and cake. I made my way to the restroom, needing a moment alone. As I was washing my hands, Amanda entered with two of her friends. I just don't understand why she would wear that, Amanda was saying, her voice carrying in the tiled room. It's so fitted. At her age. I froze, my hands still under the running water. The color is pretty, one friend offered. Maybe, but it's too young for her. And, did you see how it shows off her chest? My mother would never dress like that. It's like she's trying to get attention at my shower. The women noticed me then, and an awkward silence fell. I dried my hands carefully, my face burning with humiliation. When I turned around, Amanda was examining her reflection in the mirror, patting her hair. Ella, she said, as if just noticing me. We were just talking about how the event turned out. Isn't everything perfect? I looked at her directly. This young woman who had married my son, who was carrying my grandchild, who had just publicly shamed me. Yes, I said quietly. The event that I paid for is lovely. Her eyes widened, and a flush crept up her neck. What do you mean? Michael didn't tell you. He asked me to cover the venue and catering. Over $4,000. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances and slipped out of the restroom, leaving us alone. He wouldn't do that without telling me, Amanda said, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. You can ask him, I replied, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. But right now, I think I'd like you to explain why my dress is inappropriate. She looked away, fidgeting with her bracelet. I didn't mean, It's just that my mother thought it was a bit young for someone your age, and this is an important day for me. I see. I straighten my shoulders. Well, Amanda, I'm sorry my appearance has disturbed your important day. I'll leave now. Elaine, don't be dramatic. But I was already pushing past her, my dignity intact despite the trembling in my hands. I found Jenna, told her I wasn't feeling well, and asked her to explain to Michael later. Then I drove home in my beautiful teal dress, feeling like a costume I had foolishly thought I could wear. At home, I removed the dress carefully, hanging it in my closet, where it would likely never be worn again. I put on my comfortable clothes, cotton pants and a loose blouse, and sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. The afternoon light had shifted, casting long shadows across the floor. My phone pinged with messages from Jenna and later from Michael, but I didn't answer them. Instead, I took out my checkbook and a piece of stationery. In my neat teacher's handwriting, I wrote a brief note to Amanda and attached a detailed invoice for the baby shower expenses. This was not about revenge. This was about being seen, about refusing to be invisible any longer. I didn't sleep that night. The humiliation kept replaying in my mind like a cruel film reel. Amanda's words in the bathroom, the dismissive glance at my handmade quilt, the whispers of her friends. Dawn found me at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea, watching as the desert sky turned from black to purple to fiery orange. My phone had been buzzing intermittently since I'd left the shower. 12 missed calls from Michael, 8 from Jenna, and 3 text messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Amanda's relatives checking if the old lady was having a meltdown. I finally answered when Jenna called again at 7. Mom, are you okay? I've been worried sick. I'm fine, honey. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. What happened? You just disappeared. And then Amanda was upset, and Michael wouldn't tell me anything except that there was some misunderstanding. I traced the wood grain of my kitchen table with my fingertip. Did she tell them what she said to me? No, Jenna sighed. She just kept saying you were acting strange, and left suddenly. Mom, what did she say to you? I told her everything. The bathroom conversation, the comments about my dress, and finally about the money. $4,000. Jenna's voice rose in disbelief. You paid for the entire shower? Why didn't you tell me? I would have helped. Michael asked me to keep it quiet. Apparently, Amanda is sensitive about money, but not too sensitive to criticize your appearance at an event you funded. That's rich. Jenna had always been the fiery one, quick to defend. What are you going to do? I sent her an invoice last night, I said quietly. A beat of silence. Then Jenna burst out laughing. You did what? Oh my God, Mom. I've never been prouder. Her laughter loosened something in my chest. It wasn't impulsive. I thought about it carefully. If she wants to treat me like a service provider rather than family, then she can pay for the service. Absolutely right. So what now? Now I wait. I didn't have to wait long. By mid-afternoon, Michael was at my door, his face a storm cloud of confusion and anger. Mom, what is this? He thrust a paper at me, the invoice I'd sent to Amanda. I stepped back to let him in, closing the door against the dry Arizona heat. It's exactly what it looks like, Michael. An invoice for the shower expenses. He followed me into the living room, where bookshelves lined the walls. A lifetime of collecting stories. The leather armchair that had been Tom's favorite still held pride of place by the window. I don't understand. We already thanked you for helping with the costs. I turned to face him. Did you know that Amanda told her friends my dress was inappropriate? That I was showing too much skin in a boat neck dress with sleeves and trying to get attention at her shower? Michael's eyes widened.
What?
No, she didn't mention that. She cornered me in the bathroom with her friends. They were laughing about how I was dressed too young for my age. He sank into Tom's chair, running a hand through his hair, so like his father's, dark with just a touch of silver at the temples. Mom, I'm sure there was a misunderstanding. Amanda wouldn't. There was no misunderstanding, Michael. I heard her clearly. After I paid for her perfect day, she publicly humiliated me. But the invoice, this isn't like you. You've never been petty about money. The word petty stung like a slap. I sat down on the sofa across from him, my back straight, the way I used to sit when conferencing with difficult parents during my teaching years. This isn't about money. This is about respect. For 35 years, I've put everyone else first. I worked 2 jobs to put you and Jenna through college after your father died. I've never asked for anything in return except basic courtesy. Michael looked down at his hands. I know, Mom. And we appreciate everything you've done. Appreciation isn't what I saw yesterday. What I saw was a young woman who thinks I'm an embarrassment, who couldn't even pretend to value a gift I spent months making. The quilt. His head snapped up. What about the quilt? She barely looked at it. Called it traditional in that tone people use when they mean outdated. Michael was quiet for a long moment. I didn't know that either. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't want your apology, Michael. I want you to understand that I won't be treated this way anymore. Not even for the sake of seeing my grandchild. His face paled. What does that mean? It means Amanda needs to apologize sincerely and acknowledge the disrespect. It means things need to change. And if they don't... His voice was barely audible. I felt a profound sadness settle over me. Then I'll be here in my home living my life. You're always welcome. My door is always open to you and to my grandchild, but I won't put myself in situations where I'm made to feel less than. Michael left shortly after, taking the invoice with him, his shoulders slumped under the weight of being caught between his mother and his wife. I watched him drive away from the window of what had once been his bedroom, now my sewing room. The next day, I threw myself into routine, weeding the desert-adapted garden in the cool morning hours, meeting my retired teacher friends for lunch, and working on a new quilt design in the afternoon. I kept my phone nearby, but didn't check it obsessively. Whatever happened next would happen on its own timeline. 3 days passed. Then, as I was preparing dinner, there was a knock at my door. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened it to find Amanda standing on my porch, looking uncomfortable in the late afternoon sun. "May I come in?" she asked, her hand resting protectively over her baby bump. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered my home with the cautious steps of someone entering foreign territory, though she'd been here many times before. "Would you like some water? It's hot out there." She nodded, and I poured her a glass from the filtered pitcher in my refrigerator. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd written the invoice nearly a week ago. "Michael told me what you said," she began, turning the water glass in her hands about what happened at the shower. I waited, watching her face. She was beautiful in that polished way of young professional women, highlighted hair, subtle makeup, manicured nails. I had never been that kind of woman. Even in my youth, I want you to know that my mother was the one who made those comments about your dress. I was just repeating what she said to your friends in the bathroom where you knew I could hear you. She had the grace to look ashamed. Yes, it was wrong. I was wrong. The silence stretched between us. "And the invoice?" she finally asked. "What about it?" "Michael said you sent it because you felt disrespected." I nodded. "Yes." She took a deep breath. "I had no idea you paid for everything. Michael told me his bonus covered it." That was news to me, but I kept my expression neutral. So, Michael had lied to both of us. "I brought a check," she said, reaching into her purse. For the full amount. I looked at the check she placed on the table, made out for $4,250. I stared at the check on my kitchen table, Amanda's looping signature at the bottom. A part of me wanted to tear it up to say this wasn't about the money. But another part, the part that had spent decades being practical, knew that $4,250 would make a difference in my modest retirement. "I can't accept this," I said finally. Amanda's eyes widened. But the invoice was to make a point. I didn't actually expect to be paid back. She twisted her wedding ring, a large diamond that must have cost Michael several months' salary. "Then what do you want from me, Elaine?" The directness of her question caught me off guard. What did I want? Respect couldn't be demanded. Love couldn't be purchased. "I want to understand why you're so uncomfortable with me," I said, surprising myself with my honesty. "From the moment you and Michael got engaged, I felt like you were pushing me away. I've tried to respect your boundaries, but I don't know what I've done to deserve this treatment. Amanda stared out the window at my garden, where desert wildflowers were beginning to bloom after our brief spring rains. It's not anything you've done, she said quietly. It's who you are. And who am I? You're the perfect mother. Her voice was tight. The widow who sacrificed everything for her children. The woman who made Michael the man he is. How am I supposed to compete with that? I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Compete, Amanda? This isn't a competition, is it? Every time Michael mentions something you did for him, every time he compares my cooking to yours, every time he talks about the amazing life you built after his father died, how do you think that makes me feel? I considered her words carefully. I had never viewed my relationship with Michael this way, as some kind of maternal territory I was defending. But perhaps from Amanda's perspective, that's exactly what it looked like. I raised Michael, I said slowly. That's true. But I'm not trying to mother him anymore. He's a grown man who's made his own choices, including choosing you. He didn't just choose me, she said, her hand moving to her stomach again. He chose this life we're building. Sometimes I think he feels torn, like he owes you something that he can never repay. The afternoon light cast long shadows across my kitchen. Outside, a hummingbird hovered near the feeder I kept filled. I've never wanted Michael to feel indebted to me, I said. Everything I did because I love him, not because I expected anything in return. Amanda took a sip of water. Maybe not consciously, but there's a weight to that kind of sacrifice. It creates an obligation, whether you intend it or not. Her words stung because there was truth in them. Hadn't I felt a flicker of resentment when Michael moved across the state for college? When he took that job in Phoenix instead of coming back to Prescott? When he married Amanda without asking for my input or blessing? Perhaps you're right, I admitted. But that doesn't excuse humiliating me at the shower. No, it doesn't, she agreed. And I am sorry for that. Truly, my mother has strong opinions, and sometimes I find myself echoing her when I'm nervous. And why were you nervous? It was your shower surrounded by your friends. Amanda looked down at her hands. Because I know they were comparing me to you, the perfect homemaker who raised 2 successful children alone. Who made a beautiful quilt by hand while I can barely sew a button. Who still looks, she stopped herself. Who still looks, what? Beautiful? She finished reluctantly. You're in your 60s and you're still beautiful, Elaine. That teal dress was stunning on you. My mother said it was inappropriate, but honestly, I think she was jealous. I think I was jealous, too. I sat back, genuinely surprised. In all my years of teaching teenagers, I'd learned to recognize when someone was feeding me a line. Amanda wasn't lying. At least not entirely. There was something real in her admission. That's not what I expected you to say. A small, sad smile crossed her face. I know I'm not proud of it, but this pregnancy has made me feel huge and unattractive. And then you walked in looking elegant and put together, and all eyes turned to you. She shook her head. It's not an excuse, just an explanation. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the old wall clock that had hung in this kitchen since before Michael was born. I don't want this tension between us, I said finally. Especially not with the baby coming. That child deserves to know both of its grandmothers without being caught in the middle of whatever this is. Amanda nodded. I agree. She pushed the check toward me again. Please take this. Michael told me everything about how he asked you to pay without telling me. About how he claimed it was his bonus. He wasn't honest with either of us. I hesitated, then folded the check and placed it in my apron pocket. All right, but this isn't a transaction that erases everything. We need to establish some ground rules going forward. What kind of ground rules? Respect, I said simply. On both sides, I'll be more mindful of your position as Michael's wife and the mother of his child. But in return, I expect to be treated as a full member of this family, not an inconvenient obligation. That seems fair, she said, though I could see uncertainty in her eyes. And no more secrets, I added. If there are financial issues or anything else I should know about, I want to hear it directly, not filtered through Michael's protective instincts. At this, Amanda seemed to stiffen slightly. Financial issues? What has Michael told you? Nothing specific, I replied, noting her reaction. Just that you're being careful with your savings because of the baby. She relaxed marginally. Right, of course, babies are expensive. Something in her tone made me curious, but I didn't press. One revelation at a time was enough for today. Would you like to stay for dinner? I offered. I'm making enchiladas, Michael's favorite. She hesitated, then shook her head. I should get back. Michael is waiting to hear how this went. But maybe another time. As I walked her to the door, I felt the weight of the check in my pocket. This conversation hadn't resolved everything, but it was a start, a crack in the wall between us. Amanda, I said as she stepped onto the porch. The quilt is for the baby, not for you. Whether you like it or not. It doesn't matter. It's a connection to family history. Pieces of Michael's baby blanket, fabric from Jenna's first school dress, even a square from one of Tom's shirts. Those are roots your child deserves to know about. Her expression softened. I didn't realize. I'll make sure it's used. After she left, I unfolded the check and looked at it again. Then I went to my desk, found my checkbook, and wrote out a new check for the same amount. This one I made payable to Baby Morrison College Fund. I'd give it to them at the birth. A fresh start, an investment in the future rather than payment for the past. That night, I called Jenna and told her everything. Do you believe her? My daughter asked about the jealousy thing. I considered the question as I settled into my reading chair, a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside me. I believe that's part of it, but I think there's something else going on with their finances that she's not telling me. Want me to ask Michael? No, I said firmly. I'm done with triangulating conversations. If there's something I need to know, they'll have to tell me directly. 2 weeks passed with tentative peace. Michael called more frequently than usual, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that told me he was walking on eggshells. I didn't press him about the financial situation Amanda had hinted at. If they wanted to tell me, they would. May slipped into June, bringing the first real heat of the Arizona summer. I spent my mornings in the garden before the temperature climbed, then retreated indoors to work on a new project. A series of children's books I'd been contemplating since retirement, but never found the courage to start. Teaching literature was one thing. Creating it was another risk entirely. On a Wednesday afternoon, as I was sketching character ideas at my kitchen table, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting visitors. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a dark suit holding a briefcase, too polished to be a missionary, too formal for a salesman. Mrs. Morrison, he asked when I opened the door. I'm David Weathers from Southwestern Financial Services. I didn't invite him in, keeping one hand on the door. I'm not interested in any financial products, Mr. Weathers. He smiled apologetically. I'm not selling anything, ma'am. I'm here about your son, Michael Morrison. May I come in? This is a somewhat sensitive matter. A chill ran through me despite the June heat. I stepped aside to let him enter, leading him to my living room where we sat across from each other. What about my son? I asked, my teacher's voice taking over, calm, authoritative, masking the flutter of concern. Mr. Weathers placed his briefcase on the coffee table and extracted a folder. Mrs. Morrison, your son listed you as a reference on a loan application. It's standard procedure for us to conduct a verification visit with references before finalizing approval. A loan? What kind of loan? A second mortgage on his property in Phoenix. He consulted his papers for the amount of $175,000. The figure hung in the air between us. $175,000 was substantial, far more than emergency baby expenses. I wasn't aware Michael was applying for a second mortgage, I said carefully. The application states the funds are for family medical expenses and home renovation. Mr. Weathers looked up from his paperwork. As a reference, we just need you to confirm that to your knowledge, Mr. Morrison is of sound financial character and has been truthful in his dealings. I felt the weight of the question. Something wasn't right here. Michael and Amanda both had good jobs. Their home in Phoenix was lovely, but not extravagant. And while a baby would certainly bring new expenses, $175,000 seemed excessive. Mr. Weathers, I'm afraid I can't provide a reference at this time. My son hasn't discussed this loan with me, and I need to speak with him first. The banker's professional demeanor didn't crack, but I sensed his disappointment. I understand, Mrs. Morrison. However, I should inform you that Mr. Morrison listed you not only as a reference, but as a potential cosigner if the loan isn't approved based on his financial standing alone. My blood ran cold. A cosigner? Absolutely not. I never agreed to that. I see. He made a note in his file. In that case, I'll need to report back to my office that the reference verification was inconclusive and that you decline any co-signing arrangement. After he left, I sat in Tom's old chair, staring at the bookshelves without seeing them. What had Michael gotten himself into? And why hadn't he talked to me before putting my name on loan documents? I picked up my phone to call him, then set it down again. No, this conversation needed to happen in person. I needed to see his face when I asked him about this. The next morning, I drove the 2 hours to Phoenix, arriving at Michael and Amanda's craftsman-style home just before noon. Both their cars were in the driveway. Michael would normally be at work, but Amanda had started her maternity leave early due to some minor complications. Michael answered the door, surprise evident on his face. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said, stepping past him into the air-conditioned house. "Is Amanda home, too?" "She's resting upstairs." "Mom, what's going on? You never drop by without calling." I set my purse down on their kitchen counter. The house was immaculate as always, with high-end appliances and designer touches that had always seemed slightly beyond what I knew of their salaries. "A man from Southwestern Financial Services came to my house yesterday," I said without preamble. "Something about a second mortgage application where you listed me as both a reference and a potential cosigner." The color drained from Michael's face. "They weren't supposed to contact you yet. I was going to talk to you this weekend." "Talk to me about what exactly?" "About how you're trying to borrow $175,000 using my credit without my knowledge." "It's not like that," he protested, his voice dropping to a whisper as he glanced toward the staircase. "Can we discuss this outside? I don't want Amanda to hear." We stepped out onto their back patio, where a half-finished nursery mural was visible through the window of what would be the baby's room. The Phoenix heat was oppressive, but I barely noticed it. "Start talking," I said once we were seated in the shade. Michael ran a hand through his hair, his father's gesture again, the one that always appeared when he was stressed. "We're in some financial trouble. It's complicated. Uncomplicated for me." He took a deep breath. "Amanda's firm has been downsizing. She lost her job 3 months ago." 3 months? But at the shower, you said. I know what I said. "We've been pretending everything is fine. She's been too proud to tell anyone, even her own mother. She's been applying for positions, but no one wants to hire a woman who's 7 months pregnant." I processed this information. That explains some financial strain, but not a second mortgage of this size. Michael looked away, focusing on the neighbor's roofline. "There's more. Amanda has some debt issues from before we were married. Student loans, credit cards. We consolidated it when we got married, but the interest is killing us. And now with the baby coming and her being unemployed, how much debt are we talking about?" "About 90,000, plus the medical bills that insurance isn't covering for the pregnancy complications, and we need to finish the nursery, get a safer car." I did the mental calculation. Even with all that, it didn't add up to $175,000. "You're not telling me everything, Michael." His shoulders slumped. "No, I'm not. The truth is, we've been underwater since we bought this house. We stretched to get into this neighborhood for the schools, thinking we'd grow into the mortgage with promotions and raises, but my firm froze salaries during the pandemic and never really unfroze them. We've been putting everything on credit cards just to maintain the lifestyle Amanda's family expects. And you never thought to just live within your means, downsize, move to a less expensive area?" He looked at me then, a flash of anger in his eyes. "That's easy for you to say. You've lived in the same modest house for 40 years. You don't understand the pressure." "Don't tell me what I understand." I cut him off. "I raised 2 children alone on a teacher's salary. I know exactly what financial pressure feels like." "It's different now," he insisted. "The expectations are different. The costs are different." I shook my head, disappointment washing over me. "The math is the same, Michael. You can't spend more than you make indefinitely." We sat in silence for a moment, the sound of a lawnmower from a nearby yard filling the void. "So, what's your plan?" I finally asked, "besides trying to saddle your retired mother with your debt?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't mean it like that. I just thought if you co-signed, we could get a better interest rate. We'd make all the payments. You wouldn't have to." "Stop." I held up my hand. "I'm not co-signing a loan that I know you can't afford to repay. That would be irresponsible of me." "Then what are we supposed to do?" There was desperation in his voice now. "The baby is coming in less than 2 months. We're maxed out on every credit card. Amanda's medical bills keep coming. The bank is talking about foreclosure if we miss another mortgage payment." I looked at my son, this man I had raised, who now sat before me drowning in debt and desperation, and felt a complex mix of emotions: disappointment, certainly, anger at his recklessness, but also an old familiar instinct to protect him, to fix what was broken. "How much do you need to avoid foreclosure?" I asked. "8,000 for the past due amount, plus this month's payment." I nodded, calculating. "And the medical bills?" "Around 22,000 so far." Insurance covered the standard pregnancy costs, but Amanda's complications required specialists who were out of network. "What about your retirement accounts?" "Your 401k. Michael Grimst already took a hardship withdrawal last year. Paid the penalties. It's gone." I absorbed this information, the full picture becoming clearer and more troubling. My son and his wife were not just in a temporary bind. They were on the verge of financial collapse. "Does Amanda know you listed me as a co-signer?" He shook his head. "She thinks I'm handling it. She's been so stressed about the baby and not working. I've been trying to shield her by lying, by potentially involving me in financial fraud." My voice was quiet but firm. "Michael, what were you thinking?" "I was thinking I had to do whatever it took to protect my family," he said, a defensive edge creeping into his tone. "Just like you always did for us." The comparison stung. "I never lied to you about our finances. Even when you were young, I was honest about what we could and couldn't afford. I never pretended we were something we weren't." Before Michael could respond, the sliding glass door opened. Amanda stood there in a flowing maternity dress, her expression wary. "I thought I heard voices," she said. "Ella, I didn't know you were coming today." "It was an impromptu visit," I replied, watching her carefully. "Michael and I were just discussing some financial matters." Her eyes darted to Michael, then back to me. "What kind of financial matters?" An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. I waited, giving Michael the chance to be honest with his wife. When he remained silent, staring at the patio floor, I made a decision. "A banker came to my house yesterday," I said, "about a second mortgage application where I was listed as a potential co-signer. I came to ask Michael about it." Amanda's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, shock, and finally anger. "You did what?" she asked Michael, her voice rising. Without even telling me, Michael stood up, hands extended in a placating gesture. "I was going to tell you once it was approved. I didn't want you to worry." "Worry," she interrupted. "We're about to have a baby. We're about to lose our house. Of course, I'm worried." She turned to me. "Did you know about our situation?" "Not until today," I admitted. "Michael just told me about your job, the medical bills, everything." Amanda sank into a patio chair, one hand on her rounded belly. "This is humiliating," she whispered. "There's nothing humiliating about needing help," I said gently. "The only shame is in not being honest about it." She looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "That's easy for you to say. You've always been so capable, raising 2 kids alone, managing on a teacher's salary. I can't even hold on to a marketing job or live within our means. And now your son is trying to drag you into our mess." I moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in mine. It was the first genuinely maternal gesture I'd ever made toward Amanda, and I felt her initial surprise before she squeezed my hand back. "Listen to me," I said. "Both of you. I'm not going to co-sign a loan that's built on sand. That won't solve the real problem. But I am going to help you if you're willing to accept my terms." Michael looked up sharply. "What terms?" "Complete financial transparency. I want to see everything. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, property records. No more secrets. No more pretending.
Why?
Amanda asked. So you can judge how badly we've messed up? I shook my head. So I can understand exactly what we're dealing with. I spent 30 years teaching teenagers to analyze literature, to see patterns, to understand character motivations, to find solutions within the text. I can apply those same skills to your financial situation. Michael and Amanda exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations married couples perfect. And then what? Michael finally asked. Then we make a plan, a realistic one based on the actual numbers, not on what you wish they were. It might involve difficult choices, selling this house, finding a less expensive place to live, cutting back significantly. But it will be honest, and it will be sustainable. We can't sell now, Amanda protested. The market is down, and we'd lose money. You're already losing money every month you stay, I pointed out. Sometimes the best choice is the least painful option among painful alternatives. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling around us. From inside the house, a phone rang. Michael went to answer it, leaving Amanda and me alone on the patio. Why would you help us after how I treated you? She asked quietly. I looked at the half-finished nursery through the window. Because that's my grandchild you're carrying. Because despite everything, Michael is my son, and I love him. And because I think you and I might understand each other better than either of us realized. Michael returned, his expression even more troubled. That was the mortgage company. They're processing foreclosure paperwork. We have 30 days before they file. Amanda let out a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. I stood up, suddenly feeling more focused and purposeful than I had in years. All right, I said. We start now. Michael, gather all your financial documents. Amanda, I need you to make a list of all your expenses. Everything you can think of, no matter how small. I'm going to make some calls. Calls to whom? Michael asked. First, to tell that banker that I won't be co-signing anything. Second, to my financial advisor. And third, I hesitated then committed, to a real estate agent I know who specializes in difficult situations. Mom, Michael began, but I held up my hand. You asked for my help. This is me helping, but we do it my way, the honest way. No more magical thinking. No more hoping the problem will solve itself. I drove back to Prescott that evening with a trunk full of financial documents and a heavy heart. As I navigated the familiar highway, watching the saguaro cacti silhouetted against the sunset, I thought about the choices that had led us here. Michael and Amanda had made poor decisions. Certainly, they'd lived beyond their means, hidden problems until they compounded, pretended everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But hadn't I contributed to this in my own way? Hadn't I taught Michael that problems could always be solved, that mother would always find a way, that sacrifice was the ultimate expression of love? By the time I arrived home, I had made a decision. I would help them, but not by solving their problems for them. This time, I would teach them how to solve their own problems, just as I'd taught generations of students to think critically and find their own answers. I placed the stack of financial documents on my dining room table and began to sort through them, preparing for the difficult conversations that lay ahead. Over the next 3 weeks, I immersed myself in Michael and Amanda's financial records. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Credit card statements showed minimum payments that barely touched the principal. Late fees accumulated like sediment. Luxury purchases were made just days before Amanda lost her job. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were living in a financial fantasy. I worked methodically, the way I used to grade papers, highlighting inconsistencies, making notes in the margins, compiling questions. I created spreadsheets tracking their spending patterns, their debt-to-income ratio, their assets versus liabilities. The numbers told a clear story. They needed a complete financial reset. On a Saturday morning in late June, I drove back to Phoenix for what I'd come to think of as the intervention. The temperature was already nearing 100 degrees when I arrived, the heat shimmering off the pavement. Amanda answered the door, her pregnancy now in its 8th month, making her movements slow and deliberate. "Michael's in the kitchen," she said. "He's made coffee." I followed her through their beautiful home, the home they could never really afford, noting the designer furniture, the original artwork, the expensive finishes, all the trappings of success, without the foundation to support it. Michael sat at the kitchen island, surrounded by the financial documents I'd asked him to organize. He looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from weeks of worry. "I've been up since 5, he said, gesturing to the papers, trying to make sense of it all. I set my briefcase on the counter and extracted 3 folders: red, yellow, and green. "I've already made sense of it," I said, "and now we need to talk about solutions." For the next 2 hours, I laid out what I'd found. Their monthly expenses exceeded their income by nearly $3,000, even before Amanda lost her job. They had almost $240,000 in unsecured debt spread across 12 credit cards and 3 personal loans. The house was underwater by about $50,000 due to a recent dip in the market. Michael's car lease was costing them $650 a month. Their combined student loan payments were $1,000. "It's like a slow-motion car crash," I concluded. "And it's been happening for years." Amanda's face was pale. I knew it was bad, but seeing it all laid out like this— "That's the point," I said. "You've both been avoiding looking at the full picture. Now we have no choice but to face it." Michael rubbed his temples. "So, what's the plan? You said you had solutions." I opened the red folder first. "These are the immediate actions. Non-negotiable steps to stop the bleeding." I handed them a typed list. "Cancel all subscription services. Sell the second car. Return any recent purchases that can be returned. Cut up the credit cards. Physically cut them so you're not tempted to use them." Amanda looked at the list, then at me. "You want us to sell my car? How am I supposed to get around with a newborn? Michael's car is paid off. Yours is leased at an exorbitant rate. You'll share one car until you're back on solid financial ground." I kept my voice matter-of-fact. "This isn't punishment, Amanda. It's mathematics." She looked like she wanted to argue but nodded instead. I opened the yellow folder next. "These are the medium-term solutions. You have 30 days before foreclosure proceedings begin. That gives us time to pursue a short sale." "A short sale?" Michael repeated. "But we'd lose everything we've put into this house." "You've already lost it," I said gently. "The equity doesn't exist anymore. A short sale is your best option to avoid foreclosure and the credit damage that would come with it." I laid out the rest of the yellow folder's contents: a list of more affordable neighborhoods with good schools, bankruptcy options as a last resort, and potential job opportunities for Amanda that could accommodate a new mother. Finally, I opened the green folder. "And this is the long-term plan. Once you're in a right-sized home with expenses you can actually afford, you'll follow this budget." I slid a detailed spreadsheet across the counter. "Every dollar has a job. Every expense is accounted for. It will feel restrictive at first, but eventually it will feel like freedom." Michael and Amanda studied the documents in silence. I could see the emotions playing across their faces: shame, fear, glimmers of hope. "There's one more thing," I said, reaching into my purse. I withdrew an envelope and placed it on the counter. "This is a check for $30,000. Their heads snapped up in unison. "Mom, no," Michael started. I held up my hand. "Let me finish. This isn't a gift. It's a loan with terms." I slid a simple contract next to the check. 5-year term, low interest, monthly payments that fit within the budget that I've created. The money is specifically for catching up on the mortgage, so you have time for the short sale and for paying the medical bills so they don't go to collections. "Why would you lend us money after everything you've seen?" Amanda asked. "Because you're family," I said simply. "And because this loan comes with accountability, you'll send me monthly updates on your progress. You'll stick to the budget. You'll make the hard choices. And you'll teach my grandchild the financial lessons you both had to learn the hard way." Michael looked at the contract, then at me. "We don't deserve this." "This isn't about what you deserve," I replied. "It's about what you need and what your baby needs." Amanda reached for the contract first, reading it carefully. "These terms are more than fair," she said, looking up at me with new respect in her eyes. I know, I said. I'm not trying to profit from your situation. I'm trying to help you rebuild. Michael signed next, his hand slightly unsteady. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet, I warned. The hard part is still ahead. Changing habits is much more difficult than signing papers. After they both signed, I took the contract and made copies for each of us. Then I wrote out the check, feeling the weight of the decision. This money represented a significant portion of my savings, funds I'd earmarked for traveling in my retirement years. But some journeys, I realized, were more important than others. As I drove home that evening, I felt a curious lightness. For decades, I'd carried the responsibility of my children's well-being. I'd sacrificed my own needs, my own dreams to ensure they had opportunities. But this was different. I wasn't solving their problems for them. I was giving them tools to solve their own problems, setting boundaries, establishing consequences. For perhaps the first time, I was helping without diminishing them or myself. The following week, Michael texted me daily updates. They'd canceled 6 subscription services. They'd listed Amanda's car for sale. They'd met with a real estate agent about the short sale. Each message contained a note of determination. I hadn't heard from my son in years. Amanda sent me a photo of the nursery furniture now set up in their bedroom since they decided to use the nursery as a temporary office for her freelance graphic design work. Making do with what we have, she wrote. It's actually kind of liberating. Small steps, difficult choices, real change. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Michael. Amanda had gone into labor a month early. I threw some clothes in a bag and drove to Phoenix, my heart racing with both worry and anticipation. By the time I arrived at the hospital, my grandson had already been born, small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair like his father's and grandfather's before him. When I entered the hospital room, Amanda was holding the baby, Michael seated beside her on the bed. They both looked up at me, exhausted but radiant. Mom, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Meet James Thomas Morrison, named after Dad. James Thomas Morrison, named for Tom. I felt my breath catch as I moved to Amanda's bedside, looking down at the tiny face wrapped in a hospital blanket. He had Tom's chin, the same chin Michael had inherited, and something about the set of his eyes reminded me of Jenna as a newborn. He's perfect, I whispered, the familiar surge of love taking me by surprise, even though I'd been expecting it. May I hold him? Amanda nodded, carefully transferring my grandson into my arms. He weighed almost nothing. This new life carried our family's legacy in his very cells. I cradled him close, inhaling that indescribable newborn scent. The doctors say he's doing well despite being early, Michael said. I think they heard him down in the lobby. A nurse came in to check Amanda's vitals, and Michael stepped out to call Jenna with an update. I settled into the visitor's chair, still holding James, while Amanda rested. I never thought it would be like this, she said softly, watching me with her son. Like what? This peaceful. This right. She adjusted herself in the hospital bed. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified of how you would be as a grandmother. I was sure you'd take over, make me feel inadequate. Instead, she trailed off, searching for words. Instead, I helped you see the reality of your situation. I finished for her. She nodded. It was awful, humiliating, the hardest thing I've ever faced, but also the most honest thing anyone has ever done for us. I looked down at James, his tiny fingers curled around my thumb. When Tom died, I learned that love sometimes means facing hard truths. It would have been easier to pretend everything was fine, to shield Michael and Jenna from the reality of our finances. But that wouldn't have prepared them for the world. And yet Michael still ended up in this mess, Amanda said, a note of bitterness creeping into her voice. We all make our own mistakes, I replied. I couldn't prevent that, but I could show him how to recover from them. And now you both can show James. The short sale of their Phoenix house went through 2 months after James was born. They took a hit on their credit but avoided foreclosure. With part of my loan, they put a modest down payment on a small 3-bedroom ranch house in Prescott Valley, just 20 minutes from my home. The house needed work: an outdated kitchen, worn carpets, and a backyard full of rocks and weeds. But it was solid in a good school district and, most importantly, affordable on Michael's salary alone. I helped them move in on a crisp October day, the Arizona autumn bringing relief from the summer heat. We formed a caravan of rental trucks and cars filled with the possessions they decided to keep. After selling much of their high-end furniture to pay down debt, Amanda had found work she could do from home, freelance graphic design projects that let her set her own hours around James' schedule. It paid less than her corporate job had, but without a commute or childcare costs, it made financial sense. More importantly, it gave her a sense of contribution without the pressure of her previous position. As we unpacked boxes in their new kitchen, I found myself working alongside Amanda, passing dishes for her to arrange in the cabinets. "I'm thinking of repainting these," she said, gesturing to the dated oak cabinets. "White, maybe with new hardware. It would brighten the space without costing much." "That's a good idea," I agreed. "I refinished my cabinets about 10 years ago. I could help if you'd like." She looked at me with surprise. "You know how to refinish cabinets, Amanda?" "I've been a homeowner on a tight budget for 40 years. I know how to do most basic home improvements. How do you think I've kept my place up all this time?" She considered this, then smiled. "I'd like that. Maybe you could teach me." It was a small moment, but it felt significant, the beginning of a different kind of relationship between us. Not the tense competition of before, but something collaborative, educational, generational. 6 months after James was born, Jenna flew in from Seattle for his christening. The ceremony was small, held at the Presbyterian church Michael had attended as a child. Afterwards, we gathered at my house for a simple lunch in the backyard where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. "To James," Michael toasted, raising a glass of sparkling cider. "And to new beginnings." We all clinked glasses. James, secure in Amanda's arms, let out a happy gurgle, as if adding his own approval. Later, as Jenna and Michael cleaned up the dishes inside, I sat with Amanda on the patio, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of pink and gold. "We made the last payment on one of the credit cards today," she said. "It was one of the smaller ones, but still, it felt good to close the account." "That's wonderful," I said. "The first debt you clear is always the most satisfying." "We still have a long way to go." "Yes," I agreed. "But you're moving in the right direction." She adjusted the blanket around James, who had fallen asleep in her lap. "Michael and I have been talking about putting together a memory box for James. Photos, keepsakes, things we want him to have someday." She hesitated. "We were wondering if you might have anything of Tom's that could go in it. Something to connect James to the grandfather he'll never meet." The request touched me deeply. "I have Tom's pocket watch. His father gave it to him when we got married. I've been saving it." "That would be perfect," Amanda said softly. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, from the humiliation at the baby shower to this peaceful evening in my garden. It hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, painful realizations, pride swallowed on all sides. But sitting there with my grandson sleeping peacefully and my daughter-in-law looking at me not as a rival but as a source of wisdom, I felt a profound sense of rightness. "You know," I said, "when I sent you that invoice after the shower, I never imagined we'd end up here." Amanda laughed quietly. "Neither did I, but I'm glad we did." She looked down at James, then back at me. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. For a long time, I saw you as a threat, the perfect mother-in-law I could never measure up to. I didn't understand that we could learn from each other. And I'm sorry I didn't try harder to understand your perspective," I replied. It's not easy being the newcomer in an established family. Inside the house, I could hear Michael and Jenna laughing about some shared childhood memory. Out here, Amanda and I sat in comfortable silence, the sleeping baby between us, a bridge connecting past to future. I thought about the teal dress, still hanging in my closet, unworn since that day. Perhaps it was time to reclaim it, to wear it not as a symbol of humiliation, but as a reminder of how far we'd come. maybe for James' first birthday. The path ahead would still have challenges. Michael and Amanda's financial recovery would take years, not months. Parenting would bring its own trials. Family dynamics would continue to evolve. But for the first time, I felt we were facing these challenges together, 3 generations, imperfect but united. As the last light faded from the sky, I reached over and gently touched James's small hand. "Welcome to the family," I whispered. "The real one, not the one we pretend to be." If you've ever experienced family disrespect like I did, share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of women who found their voice after 60, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when the next chapter of my journey is published.